The district posted this evening's agenda to board docs at least 24 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting. Is there a motion to approve that previously posted agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any amendments to offer?
There are no amendments.
The agenda has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please signify by saying I oppose and state your name for the record. Those abstaining, please signify by saying I abstain and state your name for the record. Motion carried. I will now turn over the Finance and Operations Committee meeting to Co-Chair Director Warsavage.
Thank you very much, President Desnoyers. Mr. Rogers, would you mind going over our agenda for this evening, and you can launch right into the first presentation, please.
Sure. Tonight we have two agenda items. The first is the 2023 General Obligation Bond update. I will provide an update on the district's 2023 financing plan, and additionally we'll seek authorization to proceed with the necessary steps to issue a general obligation bond for 2023. The second item is policy, which will require board action as well. We have policy 830, breach of computerized personal information, and policy 830.1, data governance, storage, and security. So jumping right in, we have the bond presentation. So again, we're discussing the 2023 bond issuance and the plan surrounding the financing of that bond. Throughout tonight's presentation, we'll discuss the type of bond, the potential capital projects used that will be utilized through this financing, the historical interest rate review, and what our next steps are. So first up, the type of bond. And this is very similar to last year's presentation during the 2022 bond issuance update, where we discussed a bank qualified bond and how the district can utilize that and the advantages of utilizing a bank qualified versus a traditional general obligation bond. So that is what our plan would be for this year, and that's what we're seeking the authorization to do from the board tonight, moving into next month's board meeting. So under a bank qualified bond, the issuer or the district is issuing less than $10 million during any given calendar year. So why we're able to do that again this year, just like we did in 2022, we did not issue any other debt in the calendar year of 2023. So we are still eligible to go down the path of a bank qualified bond. I will note that although we will be issuing debt for less than $10 million, when we ask the board to approve the max parameter resolution, it's typically about 20% higher. And this allows us flexibility in marketing the bond and also adjusting the amortization schedule as needed through the sale of the bond. I say that because in 2022, it's very, you'll see that the presentation is similar to this. We came out, it was bond less than $10 million. The max parameters was roughly $12 million, or that 20% gap for marketing purposes. And in the end, we issued just under 10 million. It was about 9.995. But I just want to put that out there so that everybody's aware. That's slight deviation from some of the facts that were presented during the presentation in 2022. So as far as using a bank qualified bond and what advantages do we get from going down that path? It bodes a potential stronger market, which will help with the potential interest rate differential. So what I mean by that is you can get slightly preferential rates versus your traditional bond going out more than $10 million and how the bond's marketed. It also allows for a surer call feature, which means roughly 5 years out, you'd have the ability to refinance the issuance if rates are in a more preferential market for the district. Finally, the last piece here, and this wasn't discussed previously because it really didn't exist in 2022, but the potential for positive interest arbitrage. So basically what that means is it's the interest rate you're borrowing at, so your debt rate, versus what you can actually make on the investment market. So for the first time in probably 20 plus years, municipals, governments, and schools are actually seeing higher investment rates than what we're actually borrowing at. So let's say we borrow at 4.5%. Right now, our interest rates from our banks are over 5%. So there's a chance you can actually make more on investing the money versus what you're paying out, and that's called interest arbitrage. So in a normal scenario, a traditional bond, there's a cap on how much it can be, and if it goes above that, they go back and you actually have to refund the interest. In a bank qualified, you actually have the potential to utilize that positive interest arbitrage. And what that does, it goes right back into your capital fund, and you can use that to offset additional capital projects. So the potential projects that we're looking at, quite frankly, this slide would, in most cases, simply say Clifton Heights Middle School. Right now, we don't have approved bids out on the we haven't put the bids out yet. So in an effort to still use the bank qualified to the district's advantage for all the reasons stated on the previous slide, we'll market this as Clifton Heights and other existing school improvements based on our FAC. So we'll look at things like roof replacements, parking lot replacements, HVAC projects, and toilet room renovations. But the expectation is these funds will be utilized specifically for Clifton Heights. For some reason, if the bids weren't to be approved by the board for whatever reason, this would give us the flexibility to still be able to use the money for other capital projects that we're well aware of and need based on our site assessment that was recently done. And here's a look at historical interest rates. So obviously everyone has seen what the markets are doing. There's a lot of talk out there of how high rates are. You hear about it in the home buying market. But if you look across, this is 30-year look back, and you can see in the red box all the way to the right where we are currently in 2023. In the box in the slight middle right, you'll see the minimums, the max, the average, and current. So the average on a 10-year issuance here is 3.286 right now, or is the average 3.286. Currently, they're sitting at right about 3%. Now, I want to point out, and we talk about this a lot when we do these presentations, but this is a 10-year issuance versus, the district typically goes out 20, 30 years depending on the bond. So your rates will be slightly higher. Similar, again, I'd like to try to equate it to a mortgage. If you're going out for a mortgage on your home, if you're mortgaging on a 10-year mortgage, you're going to get a better rate than if you're doing a 30-year mortgage. So I just want to point that out. But they still fluctuate at the same rate, right? So it's still showing we're below average on a 30-year average. And this is looking out over the past 18 months. So this is really taking that red box from the last slide and expanding it so you can see what's been occurring over the past 18 months. And again, the average for the past 18 months is 2.467. And again, the current is 3%. So we're slightly higher than the past 18-month average. But again, it's not as dramatic as you're seeing in a more volatile, like mortgage rate market that you probably hear a lot more about, in your personal lives and out in the news. So all of that being said, we're really floating right around average rates, over 30 years and, the past 18 months or so, slightly above. So what are our next steps? Again, we're going to ask for authorization from the board and request that the board approves a max parameter resolution at the October 10th board meeting. From there, if approved, we would then schedule a Moody's rating agency interview in late October. Out of that interview would produce an updated Moody's credit opinion early November. We would look to do pricing and a rate lock in mid-November with a settlement in December. And the reason for this timeline specifically is on the previous slide, as we said, you can't issue more than $10 million in a given calendar year. So we have to close this prior to the calendar year closing, because once we hit 2024, there's going to be another conversation about bond issuance, because at that point we'll be looking at hopefully getting shovels in the ground for Clifton and issuing various bonds to fund that project in full. At this point, does the board have any questions?
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. We'll take it around the board. Does anyone have any questions? Dr. Haig?
Thank you, Director Vorsavage. Mr. Rogers, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we last year talk about a bank qualified bond, but then actually end up getting a general obligation bond? Other way around? No, what am I thinking of? Help me out. Wasn't
So we did go through bank qualified, and we did issue a bank qualified. I think that we had the previous issuances where we refinanced in 2021. We issued a full bond, which was Series 21A. That was for the vast majority of Aronimink. And then we did come out in 2022 with a bank qualified. There was a conversation in the approval of the max parameters. There was a comment made, hence the extra bullet point on the slide. There was a comment made that we talked about it being below 10 million and questions of why was the max parameter saying 12 million, which created a little bit of confusion. But again, like I said on that previous slide, it was at roughly 20% for the max parameters just to give our financial advisors and bond counsel the ability to market a bond with a little more flexibility, especially with as setting the amortization schedule to fit into the way we've been lapping our debt. But ultimately, it was issued at $9.995 million, just $5,000 under that $10 million mark.
okay. Thank you.
The bond is backed by the taxing power of the district. All of the bonds that you issue will be general obligation bonds. The tax status of the bonds is whether it's bank qualified or non-bank qualified. So it's always going to be a general obligation pledge of the taxing power. It's always going to be a general obligation pledge of the taxing power. It's just in this situation and in last year, because we can issue 10 million or less per calendar year, you can take advantage of the bank qualified tax status, which gets you the better interest rate, the shorter call feature, kind of the advantages of that. So when you can take advantage of bank qualified, it's advantageous. You can't always do it because you might need to issue more than that to do the project. But this year you can take advantage of it again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers, we're still relatively low on our debt ratio with this, and knowing that we have a very large project coming up in the new year.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We haven't had, if we didn't start issuing debt back in 2018, 2019, we would have been debt free by 2025 or 6, I think, if I recall correctly, 26, which is not a good situation to be in when you're any district, let alone a district our size. So the previous and current utilization of our debt issuance is very prudent.
I know sometimes the members of the public don't understand it, but it is a common practice for school districts, municipalities, and things like this to do this kind of funding in order to achieve the goals of the district, the municipality. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting in a building. We'd still be over at Aronimink and in the high school where our students really need to be. So thank you.
I just had one point of clarification, probably for myself as well as the public. Mr. Rogers, could you explain the advantage of that potential for positive interest arbitrage again? How that would have a net positive impact in case anyone had missed that?
I'll take a shot at it, but if you want a more technical answer, we can have Zach answer. But in layman's terms, for last year's, when the bond got issued, the cash goes into the bank account, and we're allowed to invest on extremely safe investments based on school code, essentially. Those rates have risen to the point where they're over 5.5%. And even, last year the bond was at a lower interest rate issued. So on this one, if we project out, let's say it's a 4.5% interest rate, you're paying 4.5% on that money. On the flip side, that money is now in a bank account that up until as it's being spent, it's earning interest. So the interest you're earning on the debt that's issued, you're actually making more money than you're actually paying out. So on a non-bank qualified, from tax perspective, there's a calculation that you can only make so much. And in this scenario, those regulations are just different. So it's essentially you're earning more interest on a loan than you are paying it out.
Makes sense to me. Thank you very much. All right, seeing that there are no other comments from board members, I believe we're ready to move on to agenda item number 2. President Desnoyers, were you going to take that one over?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. The two policies under consideration at this meeting, as Mr. Rogers stated at the beginning of the meeting, are Policy 830, Breach of Computerized Personal Information, and Policy 830.1, Data Governance, Storage, and Security. The changes to these policies, a brief summary of the changes. The changes to these two policies will need to be moved forward by the board at this meeting and approved at a subsequent board meeting in order to take effect. To briefly summarize the changes, and the changes to policies 830 and 830.1 are driven by changes in Pennsylvania law, specifically Act 151 of 2022, which amended the Breach of Personal Information Notification Act. A full description of the changes and contents of each policy can be found in the summary of policy changes posted to board docs. The detail provided by PSBA is lengthy, so I am not going to read it aloud tonight. So if anyone has any questions, I'll take those.
Director Tresnori, so this is a first reading, and then our next meeting it's a second reading, or
So these two policies went through a first reading at the September board meeting 2 weeks ago, and they are being considered at this meeting. It's not considered an actual reading because it's not a voting meeting. And then at the October 10th meeting, these two policies will be on the agenda for second reading, at which point, if they are approved, the changes take effect.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now is the time for public comment. Priority will, of course, be given to those physically present. Is there anyone physically present that would like to make comment at this time? Please announce your name, address, and the agenda item. All right, seeing none. Ms. Buford, do we happen to have any online comments?
No, sir, we do not have any online comments.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will have Mr. Rogers review the agenda items, and if you can let us know which ones require board action, that would be appreciated.
Sure. So again, tonight we had two agenda items, both require board action. First was the 2023 general obligation bond update, where we discussed the financing plan for the district for 2023, and we are seeking authorization to proceed with setting a max parameters resolution that would be put before the board at the October 10th board meeting.
All right, is there a consensus on that team?
Yes.
Yes.
And number two is policy. So we have policy 830, breach of computerized personal information, 830.1, data governance, storage, and security, which would require board action to move to the next meeting.
Consensus?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right, and with that, I hand the meeting back over to President Desnoyers.
Thank you, Director Warsavage. Since the agenda is concluded, a motion is in order for the adjournment of the Finance and Operations Committee meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone.